Hi everyone and welcome to Deep Geek Live. Today we are looking at prophecy in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire. It's a massive subject. We've got lots of different fantastic questions to be going through. What I always do is just very quickly say what's been happening this last 7 days or so in the wider world of fantasy TV shows and literature. What has happened the last 2 or 3 weeks is that just on the Thursday before I've gone live, Amazon have dropped some big thing to do with the Lord of the Rings of Power. That hasn't happened this Thursday, so I will be able to go relatively quickly into the main subject today, which I know will please many of you, but I can't really go on without mentioning very briefly that the trailer, if you somehow managed to miss it, the teaser trailer, the first teaser trailer for The Lord of the Rings of Power is now out. It dropped Sunday night, Monday morning, my time, in the Super Bowl, and it was only about a minute long, but it was a huge hit in as much as 257 million views in 24 hours. Amazon, it seems, are absolutely delighted by that. It's had a mixed reaction, it has to be said. Personally, I am still cautiously optimistic. I think a lot of it looked pretty amazing. And if you want my breakdown of that, I did a full video breakdown, shot by shot, scene by scene, and you can find that elsewhere on this channel. So do please go and check that out if you're interested in that. The other thing to note, I think, is House of the Dragon. We've had confirmation from the president, I think it was, of HBO, that has now finished filming. This has been a very long shoot, it has to be said, but it has now finished filming, presumably at some point in the last week or two. Now, there are a couple of things to sort of build off of that. I think we can say that any hopes of an April launch for this are now, I think they now have to get out of the window completely. Post-production, I'm sure it's already begun to a degree, but it is now going ahead. Post-production, at the best of times for this kind of thing, Game of Thrones, when it was in its early season, without much by way of CGI requirements, they were doing it about 5 months, finished filming in November, launched in April, so that was about 5 months. The two probably best things to compare it against recently, The Witcher Season 2, The Wheel of Time, they've both taken 5, 6, 7 months to do it. Lord of the Rings of Power, I think, is a bit of an outlier, but they've got 13 months. So I think a realistic expectation is 5 to 7 months for this. That puts them roughly at the same time as September, when we know that the Rings of Power will be launching. I suspect that they'll want to miss that, so probably either before or after that. But as I say, I think if they had any original ideas of going for April, which would be help them out in terms of Emmy years cut off, then I think they're out of the window now. So look forward to that. If I had to guess, it would be October. I think June might be possible, but that's now February, March, April, May, June. That's 4 months. It would be very tight. So it's possible, but I think that October is probably more likely. A few things also that I wanted to pick up from the last couple of weeks, of what I always try and do with these live streams. If I get questions, super chats or something like that, where I don't have the immediate answer to me, or sometimes I just get a mind blank, then I try to come back to them. I had a few over the last couple of weeks that I've now had a chance to have a think about. Rachel Vandervoort asked, why does Ygritte tell Jon his name is an evil name? This is a fantastic little question, and it's something that, to be honest, the A Song of Ice and Fire fandom has debated a lot, because there is one answer which is a very boring answer, and then the other one which is incredibly important if true, but there's no evidence for. The boring one is, north of the Wall, winter and snow means death, so why on earth would you call somebody Snow? So that's the boring answer, and is very, very, very probably the right answer. She doesn't get a follow-up on this, so Jon doesn't ask her, so we never actually find out. The other one is that Jon Snow is a character that they know north of the Wall, but the knowledge, the history, the legend of that has passed in the south of the Wall. What if the Night's King was called Jon Snow, and we got told that the Night's King was his name was struck from the history records? They didn't strike things from the history records north of the Wall, of course, so maybe they would still remember. It's possible. There's no evidence at all to suggest it, but it's possible. So those are the two answers. Joe Mullins was saying, does the timeline match for Sarah Targaryen and Sarah the Spicemonger's wife? So Sarah Targaryen, there's lots of possibilities around here, but the Sarah Targaryen, the daughter of Jaehaerys and Alicent Targaryen, so she was born quite early on in I think it was year 69 AC. Sarah, who was Illyrio Marpatis's wife, that's clearly a long time later, so that's a couple of 100 years later. So for them being the same person, it doesn't work out, but they do go to the same place or come from the same place, Lys. So it's entirely possible that there's a descendant thing going on there. Personally, though, I think it's much more likely that Illyrio Marpatis's second wife, Sarah, was a Blackfire descendant, but that's for other reasons rather than just the coincidence of where this person comes from. Jill Elson was asking about Night Runners north of the Wall. Are they all Night's Watch deserters? There's actually only, I double-checked this, there's actually only one mention of Night Runners in the entirety of A Song of Ice and Fire. They are a tribe of wildlings, a tribe of free folk, and we don't really know huge amounts about them. Could they be the Night's Watch deserters? It's possible. Do we have enough evidence to say definitely? No, we don't. And Caius Ballerina, you were talking about Malario. This is Doran Martell's estranged wife. Malario only left her kids. This was when I was doing the Tinfoil Theories live stream a couple of weeks ago. And so this was a theory put to me. Malario only left her kids to spy for the Martells in Essos. She previously threatened to kill herself if her children were taken away. So possibly she's Septa Lemore or Quaithe. If it's Quaithe, is she supporting Dany as an anti-slavery revolutionary? Ario Hota seems to be a slave made free by going with her to Westeros, and she criticizes using children as collateral for debts. So I think this is a fantastic theory. Obviously, this was within the Tinfoil Theories. She is an intriguing character, Malario, because we only really sort of hear about her secondhand. She does come from Norvos. Doran meets her there. They fall madly in love. They marry. They move over to Dorne. They have 3 children, but they argue a lot over the years, and the customs do not match up between these two people. And she objects when Doran, with his political ways, was desperately wanting to send his children off to different places to build alliances. She was not wanting any of that. She thought, why do you send your own children away? Which you can understand. But eventually that marriage seemed to break down, and she went back to Norvos. Now, could she be spying for the Martells? It's possible. Personally, I think not, for the simple reason that George R. R. Martin has been asked about this a couple of times, and he's actually been quite open. Normally, he's very tight-lipped about anything where there's an extra bit of information there that he doesn't want us to understand. But here, he's been very open and said, sometimes people get married and they fall madly in love, but there isn't a long-term compatibility, and then they split up. And he actually talked about this, and he's basically just saying this is just one of those things in life, them getting together and then splitting up. It did not work. There was a culture clash, there was a personality clash. So I think probably not for that reason, and but I do like the theory. Okay, so those were the sort of things left over from last time. Brendan, I see, says, can I do a super fast recap on what you're talking about? I just came in super fast. Well, thank you very much for the super chat. These were just me picking up on a few random things from previous live streams that I said I would come back to. I always try to, if I don't have an answer to hand, I always try to come back to them in a future live stream just quickly. But today we are talking about prophecy in the world of Ice and Fire, which is clearly it's a real thing, but George R. R. Martin treats it in a different way to a lot of different fantasy writers, in that it is not sacrosanct. It is not a thing which is there and everything has to sort of fold into place to make sure this happens. I've said this several times in different contexts, but what he is more concerned about almost always is the human reaction to a prophecy rather than the truth of the prophecy itself. What is it that people do in reaction to hearing a prophecy? That's what fascinates him, not so much is the prophecy itself real. He cares more about how Melisandre reacts to the Azor Ahai prophecies, how Cersei reacts to Maggy the Frog's prophecies, that kind of thing. That's what drives the action of his stories rather than the truth of the prophecy. So when you get to something like, say, I don't know, Harry Potter, there is a prophecy about Harry Potter. And that is all bringing the story together, following that prophecy. How is this prophecy going to be met? That's the core of it. George R. R. Martin almost seems to litter these prophecies around all over the place within his story, and a lot of them do seem to be true or coming true. The kinds of things you can rely on, but he often just drops in all over the place these other sort of tidbits that make you go, okay, so maybe we can't trust all of them. When Daenerys goes to the House of the Undying, these are visions really rather than prophecies, but we're told straight out some of these aren't going to be true. Some of these are of futures which will not be. And there's a fantastic quote, just to sort of round off my preamble to this. This is what Tyrion says, and Tyrion often, he's our interlocutor with the story. He's the person who's sort of interpreting it for us. That's how George R. R. Martin quite often uses him. And this is what he says. Prophecy is like a half-trained mule. It looks as though it might be useful, but the moment you trust in it, it kicks you in the head. And that is the feeling that George R. R. Martin wants us to have about prophecy in his world. He loves having prophecies out there, but he doesn't want us to just think that we know where the story's going because we can see what's happening with this prophecy. His prophecies are often vague. There's often misinterpretations of words in there. There's quite often misinterpretation full stop of what it is going that we can see as a misinterpretation. And that is where he wants us to be. He wants us to be there in this kind of slightly muddy world where we can't absolutely trust anything. In the same way he was very clear up front, he wanted us not to be able to trust that any of even the main characters will survive this. He wants us not to be able to trust the prophecy either. A lot of them, even if they seem quite clear, could be interpreted quite rightly in two or more different ways. The classic example of this, and we will come back to this prophecy, I'm sure, is Azor Ahai. There are lots of ways that you can interpret who Azor Ahai, or the prince that was promised, might be, and indeed what they might do. And to the extent that I think that you can quite easily, or when the story finishes, you will quite easily be able to make a case, a robust case, that any one of 2, 3, 4, maybe even more characters were Azor Ahai reborn in some way. But it's what the characters themselves that believe, which is the important thing. Okay, so let's go to a couple of super chats that I had just before I came on air. We had Mara Lee. Thank you so much, Mara. I hugely, but you know how much I appreciate your support and care, saying just a show of much love and appreciation for all the fabulous content, merch, and stories on both your channels. Can't wait for the Rings of Power when it comes out in September. When will Westworld air on HBO? Hugs to Dan. That's my dog. When will Westworld air on HBO? We've not been told exactly a date, but I think it's Casey Blows, the president of HBO, has said summer. So that's all we know. I do wonder whether that is what will, if it is summer, whether it's the thing that they will run up against the Lord of the Rings. Anyway, that does remind me of something else in that same interview, that what he has said in regard to House of the Dragon. He said that basically it's a reasonably sure bet that they are going to renew it for a second season. They normally wait until it airs just to make doubly sure, but he says it's probably a fair bet that they will, regardless. And he did confirm that is still, House of the Dragon is still the only formally greenlit Game of Thrones spin-off. There are other things in the works. We know of 3 or 4, maybe even more other things in the works, but none of them have even at this point got as far as a greenlit pilot. So we're still a long way from any of them. And I would confidently assert that we will see season 2 of House of the Dragon before we see season 1 of any other spin-off. So we're they're placing a lot on House of the Dragon HBO, which is why I think the timing of when it's going to happen is going to be fascinating. Seeing Ara Jurgensen saying, great subject, looking forward to it. Thank you very much indeed. David Gregg saying, I can't tune in as I have a prior engagement, but I can't wait to listen to Robert's thoughts on prophecy and all the rest of it. Always a pleasure. Well, thank you very much for the super chat. I do hugely appreciate that. And just while I'm thinking about Westworld, I will be covering Westworld, but not probably in the same depth that I have on previous seasons. So this is quite a big year for the things that I cover here, as well as obviously had The Witcher earlier on, but there will be House of the Dragon, there will be The Rings of Power. So rather than burn myself out by trying to cover absolutely everything all the time, I will focus more on House of the Dragon and the Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. And yes, I will cover Westworld, but probably not in the same depth that I did in previous seasons. Andrew Kay saying, cautiously optimistic on House of the Dragon. Crondall seems to be collaborating with George R.R. Martin a bit and seems a genuine fan and student of the source material. Yeah, I'm also cautiously optimistic on House of the Dragon. I think we must expect at some point to get a full trailer for that. We did have a teaser trailer a long time ago, November, I think it was. So at some point we'll get a full trailer for that. And yeah, I think it looks good. And George R. Martin also seems cautiously optimistic. He's certainly making the right noises about it. He's seen the first episode, I think, in rough cut. They showed it to him and he seemed quite happy with it. Username redacted saying, how will the prophecy that Dany's son will be the stallion to mount the earth factor into her potential relationship with Jon or his killing of her? Okay, so the stallion that mounts the earth is, or mounts the world, is, this is one of the first prophecies that we engage with in this story. For those who don't remember when and where it was introduced, this is once Dany, she is pregnant. They know that she's pregnant. They feed her that horse's heart, which she eats. And then they're at the Dosh Kalin, and they're there in Vaes Doth Rak, and they're going to name the child. Before it's born, they're going to name the child. And this comes after the Dosh Kalin prophesy about the future of this child. And the leader of the Dosh Kalin sort of stares into, I think has a fire, stares into the smoke, and then looks at Dany, having said, this is the stallion, this child will be the stallion that mounts the world. And Khalasars, effectively, the Khalasars are going to unite behind this this child. This is going to be the greatest cull ever. Will sort of range across the entire world, destroy civilizations. The men, the Nazarenes, they will be quaking in fear. There will be death and destruction everywhere. And the Dosh Khaleen look shaken by this. They look absolutely shocked. This is clearly a prophecy which has been around, but for them to actually see this, this isn't something they say to everyone. This is a wow, there's something big going on here. So that's where this comes from. And then afterwards, Dany says, they ask what is he going to be called, and it's Rhaegar is her son's name. So that's where this comes from. And then there follows a couple of interesting conversations where Dany then tries to use this as a way to persuade Drogo that he needs to invade Westeros. And she sort of says, so when Rhaegar is going to be the stallion that mounts the world, we should be taking everybody, all of the Khalasar, over to Westeros. That's part of the world. It's going to be the entire world. And he goes, no, the world ends at the Salt Sea. That's as far as we go. And it's only later with Viserys's death killing that he changes his mind and agrees, yes, that he's going to be doing that. So the question about whether Dany's son being the stallion to mount the world, does it factor into future relationship with Jon? I think not. And I think not for one input. There is an element that I will talk about in just one moment. But the important thing here, I think, is that George R. Martin is setting out his stall very early on that not all prophecies come true. We should not trust all prophecies. What matters is how people respond to the prophecy, not the truth of the prophecy itself. Because what happens is that Mirri Maz Duur, she kills Rhaegar before he can be born. That's what she's about. She's unrepentant. And Dany says, why did you do it? And she says, because that person is going to murder thousands upon thousands of human beings, and I could not let that happen. And part of your brain goes, I kind of understand that logic. It was horrific what Mirri Maz Duur did, but at the same time, she absolutely believed in that prophecy. And it was her absolute belief in that prophecy that led her to do what she did. So this is George R. R. Martin setting out his stall early on. It's what people do in reaction to prophecy that matters, not the truth of the actual prophecy itself. So I've got another. I said there was some other implication in the future, which I'll come on to just one second, because this does link into a question from Ben over on Patreon, saying, could Khal Drogo, trying to make the stallion that mounts the world prophecy through his son, mirror Rhaegar Targaryen fulfilling the prince that was promised prophecy? Could they both have misinterpreted it? And also could it be the same prophecy told through different cultural lenses? Well, could it be the same prophecy through different cultural lenses? Possibly, and originally, but the focus seems to be different. That both of them, this seems to be a great leader who will be born, but the stallion that mounts the world is someone who will conquer the world, whereas the prince that was promised appears to be somebody who will save the world. So they do appear to be slightly different in terms of what this person will be. There's no indication that Drogo was trying to create the stallion that mounts the world. There's no hint of that. The first time we hear of that prophecy is when they go to Vaes Dothrak. He may have been, but we don't hear hints of that. Rhaegar definitely was trying to game this prophecy, thinking, first of all, he thought he himself was the prince that was promised. Then he decided it was his son who was the prince that was promised, and he was actively trying to make this prophecy happen. The interesting thing with the stallion that mounts the world is obviously somebody took steps to make sure that didn't happen, whereas here somebody was taking steps to try and make sure that it did happen. So it's kind of almost mirror images of what's going on there. But to go back to this, will it factor into potential relationship with Jon? Only in terms of what follows, I think. I've got a question on this a bit later, but in terms of Miri Mazder's rather cutting words about when Dany, when will Drogo return to me? And then she reels off this whole series of things, culminating when your womb quickens and you give birth to a living child. That is going to be playing on Dany's mind, and she will be thinking, if her womb quickens, does this mean that there's a chance? That will definitely be playing into it, which will then play into her future relations, because she goes through with Hizdahr, for example. Her thinking is, well, I'm not going to be able to give him any children, so this might be a political marriage, but we can't cement that with any children. So this is clearly something on her mind. And then suddenly the idea that she could have another child, she could have a child, and that will in some way, perhaps spiritually, bring back Drogo. It's entirely possible. Question from Marvin Martin, saying prophecy's appeal is the illusion of one's control. It's not a question, it's a statement, and I think I would probably agree with that. It's the idea that you can control what is happening, what your fate is, or what then what is interesting is the way that people then go out of their way to try and prevent it. Because if it's something they do not want, then they're trying to, then they will go out of the way. Sometimes, like with Miri Mazdur, that seems to work. With Cersei, is that going to work in that way? It's probably a very different thing there. Sasuke saying, everyone remember to take a sip of water whenever Robert puts on his glasses. Got to drink enough water. I didn't know we have a new drinking game. What about every time I take a sip of water? What do you do then? I don't know. Anyway, a question from Roman Lakovitz. Thank you very much. Saying, could you do a video with a thorough breakdown of Patchface's ramblings someday? You've talked about Patchface on live streams. Pardon me. You've talked about Patchface on live streams before, but I think it would be great with something a bit more focused. Just a humble suggestion. Yes, it's on my list actually of things to do videos about. He is a fascinating character, so I will happily at some point I will do that. I do have and these questions are tying in well, because my next question from a patron was also, this is from Diego Godoy, was also about Patchface. Hola Robert, hola. Patchface is a very interesting character. I can't wait to see what he will do in the Winds of Winter. Which one of his prophecies do you think could become true in the next book? Could something come from his quote saying he will lead the Night's Watch expedition? So Patchface, yes, I will. It deserves a proper analysis, so I will go into it in a lot more detail. My instinct with Patchface is that when we talk about, and I'll come back to this a few different times, I don't think it's just semantics to say some things are prophecy and some things are just something else. With Patchface, I think it's almost as if he now sees the world through a filter. He may well see things in the future or things that he may not know, but he sees it through this filter. One filter is doing through his silly rhymes, I know, under the sea, da-di-da-di-da, those kinds of things. But also it's almost as if he sees the world through, as if it was all underwater. As everything there, that's because that was the big experience, the life-changing experience for him was drowning and coming back. And now he sees everything through that lens. Some things certainly do. I think it can be overstated. What he says is quite vague, but some things it does appear that he has got spot on, that he talks about the Red Wedding. He doesn't say he's talking about the Red Wedding, but when you look about it, look at what he says, it does seem to make sense. Then you talked about the Night's Watch expedition. What he says, he basically volunteers, and they're saying, who's going to lead this expedition? This is to go north of the wall. And he puts up his hand and says, I'll lead it into the sea and back out again. And then he says, under the waves, certain things will happen. The mermen will serve us, we'll ride on seahorses. So what might that mean? I mean, that feels to me almost like a death thing. Into the sea and back out again, and under the waves, things will happen. That is what his experience was. And what we've seen from the expedition that has gone north, that has headed from Eastwatch up and around up to Hardhome, we get the messages back, dead things in the water. This feels quite echoey. So I think that will probably be one of the main things that we'll look on and say, okay, that was fulfilled. But as I say, it's not pure prophecy, because he is not literally going to be doing this. This is other people doing this, and this is done in a lyrical, poetic, quite fanciful way. We just have to try and understand the sort of language he's using. So it's not going to be 100% clear. Patchface may well see things perfectly, but the way he expresses them is not helpful for us. As far as his fate goes, though, it would not surprise me if he is on this fire that burns Shireen, if he's also there. Melisandre has seen, she thinks he's dangerous. When she sees him in her flame, she sees skulls around him, which is death. So she has even thought about just one word from me, and we could have him burned at the stake. So I think that when she gets that opportunity to get Shireen there, I think she will also burn him. Now, it would not surprise me if we could look through what he said and find some. I've not done all of this research. I will probably, as I say, for a video. If we can find some prophecy that connects with him being burned at the point where I think Jon Snow is going to come back at that point, seemingly from the dead. So I think we will get his most prescient moments in the next book rather than in the books that we've had so far. Okay, so that was Patchface. Let's go to Bear Island saying, hello, Robert. Blizzard is imminent here in Michigan. So I hope I'll get to hear your answer. Yeah, there's a storm on the way here in the UK as well, actually. So if I suddenly cut out, that'll be why. It seems quite calm at the moment, but yeah, it should hit at some point tomorrow. Is it possible we're all wasting our time trying to predict how prophecies will actually turn out, when we'd be further ahead to try and predict the dumbest knee-jerk reaction by a character who'd be better off having never heard a prophecy at all? Yes, and I think that's where George R. R. Martin is going with this. It's much more important for us to understand what Melisandre might do next in order to meet what she thinks is the need of her prophecies. It's much more important than actually trying to work out the truth of the prophecies that are there. So this is, and ditto Cersei, those are the two big characters who are taking these prophecies incredibly seriously. A lot of the rest do not. Dany thinks about all of the vague sort of prophecies and things that have been sort of going around, what she saw in the House of the Undying, what Quaithe has been telling her. She thinks about them from time to time, but it very rarely seems to dominate what she's doing and what she's thinking. If she suddenly changes around to reacting to these things, that will probably be quite important. But yes, what is the dumbest knee-jerk reaction by a character who'd be better off having never heard a prophecy at all? if Cersei becomes as convinced as she did on the TV show that the younger, more beautiful woman who is referenced in Maggy the Frog's prophecies, who is going to effectively be her doom, if she becomes convinced that that is Marjorie, which she's halfway on the way to doing, then she's going to have to kill Marjorie, because that's what Cersei does. That's what her knee-jerk reaction will be. So that's where in terms of driving the plot forward. Yes, I agree with you completely, Bear Island. This is about understanding how people react rather than the truth of the prophecy itself. Chelsea Oliver saying, we know Cersei puts much stock in Maggy's prophecy, and it seems to be self-fulfilling. Can you see her being a different person if she didn't believe? Well, so this is quite interesting. So we get actually, I think I've got the prophecies here, and whereas on the TV show it was just sort of rattled off as one big long prophecy, this is more of a conversation. So Cersei says, when will I wed the prince? This is Rhaegar, when she thinks that she's going to be married Rhaegar, and Maggy says, never, you will wed the king. Could she control that? That's not actually something within her control. Cersei says, I will be queen, though, and Maggy says, aye, queen you shall be, until there comes another younger and more beautiful to cast you down and take all that you hold dear. We'll come back to that one, I think, in just a moment. Cersei asks, will the king and I have children? And Maggy says, aye, 6 and 10 for him and 3 for you. Is that something that she can control? Well, how many children she has? Yes. With Robert Baratheon, again, that's not a thing she can particularly control. Gold shall be their crowns and gold their shrouds. And when your tears have drowned you, the Valonqar shall wrap his hands around your pale white throat and choke the life from you. There is one other bit as well, which we often miss out. This is, she went there not on her own, but with Melara, her childhood friend, who asks, will I marry Jaime? Which clearly she's not going to. And Maggy the Frog says, not Jaime, nor any other man. Worms will have your maidenhead. Your death is here tonight, little one. Can you smell her breath? She is very close, which is very ominous. And it is very ominous for a good reason, because Cersei's about to push her down a well because of... this is someone who's heard all of these prophecies about her future. Why on earth would she let her live? So when you're saying it seems self-fulfilling, I think some of it is self-fulfilling, and she seeks it out. But some of it, Maggy the Frog is one of those people who, it seems, she is a genuine seer. She can genuinely see the future. The amount of children she'll have, the gold their crowns, the gold their shrouds, all of that seems to add up to somebody who can see the future. And it is about as close as George R. Martin gets, I think, to saying this is immutable prophecy. This is actually what's happened. This is why I place quite a lot of weight on the Valonqar happening. But that bit is so vague that you could attribute it to various people. The self-fulfilling bit I find fascinating, because we could see a situation with the Valonqar. I'm sort of riffing off of the Valonqar here for a moment. Forgive me. We could see a chance where it is her becoming obsessed with the Valonqar prophecy if she thinks she knows who the Valonqar is, and then goes to find somebody to protect her. Who would she have to protect her? Jaime. And what if he's actually the Valonqar? That would be a very self-fulfilling thing, and have some kind of irony if she is trying to use Jaime as a way to protect her from the prophecy, but actually that is just bringing him in to fulfill the prophecy. The kind of thing that I think the irony would work for George R. R. Martin. Andrew Case saying, we see how corrupting prophecy can become. Rhaegar is seemingly an example. Stannis is well on his way in that respect. Yeah, so Stannis sees it more. His attitude to prophecy is a fascinating one. This is one on my reread through the books. I've not come across. nearly finished book one. It's a very slow reread or re-listen. My comments are on Twitter if you're interested in following me there. But Stannis, I will be interested to read as we go through them, because he starts off just being very pragmatic about this. It doesn't really seem to matter to him whether or not this is true. Melisandre thinks that he is the prince that was promised. Azor Ahai reborn. Who is he to argue? This is working in his favor. He seems quite pragmatic. The deeper in he goes, the more he kind of just implicitly allows this to be accepted, changing his banner and so on. So, and this is a very slow burn shift. So yes, his belief is quite a big and important one. Who was the other person who was saying? Rhaegar got fascinated with the prophecies and tried to make them happen. And this is his obsession with prophecy, and more than just his obsession is absolute belief that he was right at any given moment in time. That seems to have been the thing which has driven so much tragedy in this story. It's the belief in his own view of what something was. He was always absolutely convinced. He was absolutely convinced that he was going to be Prince that was promised. He was convinced his son was going to be there. He was so convinced he was going to win the Battle of the Trident. When I come back, he's always saying, when I do this and when I finish that, it's all gonna. He was not right. He got it wrong, but he was convinced of his own rightness. Lovelissa says Maggie the Frog can spit some mad bars. Absolutely. Riquette Moose saying, unlike gods and religions that are left ambiguous, some prophecies are very clearly true. What does the existence of true prophecies bring to the story? Pathos, sometimes a lot of a feeling of this magic is real. There is George R. R. Martin. I don't think I've ever heard of him talking about it in this way, but I think he loves the interplay between high and low fantasy, in the sense that traditionally speaking, in sort of genre categories, you get high fantasy. It's fantasy in which magic exists and everybody believes and accepts and understands that because there are dragons and magic users or whatever around. Low fantasy, magic is thought not to exist in the general populace. There are magical things, but maybe most people don't believe in them. George R. R. Martin, I think, loves the interplay of these two, because he starts off in book one, starts and ends very high fantasy. We have the others coming, long dead creatures of prophecy and legend coming, bringing winter with them, and then at the end the birth of dragons. But in the middle, pretty much all the rest of it, with the exception of Bran's chapters, this is so low fantasy. All of the characters we're taught to trust and believe in, think of as wise, Tyrion, Maester Lewin, people like that, they mock the idea of anything magical. So he loves this, and then he kind of brings in drops and drops of magic until you have to believe it. You have to see that that's what's going on around. And he writes it as low fantasy, even though it is now still high fantasy. So what is the existence of true prophecy? It's saying this is real. This is absolutely true. This is a magical world. There's no getting around this. And the other thing, which is what we talked about a reasonable amount already, so I won't go over it again, is that this drives the action because of people's belief in it. And that is what the truth of prophecies. That if prophecies were never true, or if they're only occasionally true, that would not bring much to this story. When prophecies are, as they are in this, mostly true but not always, that adds in a layer of uncertainty, interest. We think we know this is going to happen, but we don't necessarily know how or when or why. and maybe it won't. So you can nearly rely on it, and something you can nearly rely on is way more interesting than something than you can almost never rely on. Okay, so question from Mr. Marmello saying Ygritte the Valonqar, be careful. Ygritte. I didn't think so myself, but good. Brendan asking, will the wall fall? Yes, I'm pretty sure it will. Sarah, awesome sauce. I still like the idea of Brienne of Tarth being the beauty that replaces Cersei. I would just love that. Yes, so thank you for saying that. And I will go back to, I said I would pick up on this. So this is what Maggy the Frog says. You will be queen until there comes another younger and more beautiful to cast you down and take all that you hold dear. Now, if we're taking the words of the prophecy just on their own, this isn't another queen will come along who will take your throne or crown. This is, will take all you hold dear. What does she hold dear? Well, ultimately, her children and Jaime. Now, that is, and herself. So, what is? Does it have to be? It doesn't have to be somebody who will be queen after her. It could be interpreted very easily as the person who takes Jaime away from her. And that is where Brienne indeed could be the younger, more beautiful. And the amount of times we get this Brienne the Beauty idea coming through. We're told repeatedly that she's not physically beautiful, but then repeatedly we're told again in a certain light she did seem beautiful, or people mockingly called her Brienne the Beauty. So this idea of beauty is throughout her, and she's clearly a beautiful character, a beautiful person, a beautiful human being. So yeah, I also like it. I think this works really well, and it's the kind of the misapplication or misunderstanding of what prophecy is that is another thing that George R. R. Martin loves. Songbird saying, could you upload these live streams to your channel? I do. So the live streams, after I've done the live stream, then they should be available on my channel afterwards. So if you can't see them, then just go and have a look for them. They should definitely be there. Let's go. The question from Edward says, Rhaegar's obsession with prophecy is the lemon in the tree that was his Targaryen narcissism. Have you fulfilled the prophecy of upgrading your chair? I have now. Good prophecy. So this is something that the last couple of weeks, people, I haven't got the world's best chair here. It's a little bit squeaky. It's probably not good for my posture. I have now identified a chair. Thank you very much. And I will put it on order at some point in the next few days. So hopefully, I should have one, if not next week, then the week after. And in terms of you saying Rhaegar's obsession with prophecy is the lemon in the tea that was his Targaryen narcissism. Yeah, so Rhaegar in many ways is actually a good person, I would argue. He wanted to rule well. He wanted to be a good monarch. He wanted to save the world. As you say, it's the narcissism within him that led him to think this has to be him who saves the world, and if it's not him, surely it has to be his son who saves the world. So yes, it's a lot of Targaryens are quite self-centered, and we do think of this as being like a Targaryen disease. This is what Targaryens are like. I think George R. R. Martin would probably also remind us that if you take Rhaegar, for example, as a human being, he was brought up as heir to the throne of the Seven Kingdoms. Everything he ever wanted in life, he was given. He was told that that he would inherit. He was told that he was given every bit of training, the best people he could possibly have. He was given every manuscript to read. Not only that, but he's been told that there is a prophecy that the line of the prince that was promised comes down through him. It turns out that he seems to be very talented as well at playing his harp. He seems to be quite a talented jouster. Of course, he's going to have a massive ego. This is a person who was brought up wanting for literally zero, and he seems to be talented on top of it. There is the idea of him having a small ego just wouldn't work very well. This is not just somebody who grew up in the 1%. This is in the 0.0001%. This is absolutely the person who had everything in life. And so is he narcissistic? It wouldn't be more of a surprise if he didn't have some element of that to him. Cloaked One. Hi there, Cloaked One. This is picking up. Thank you. I love it when people do this, picking up questions for other people in the chat. This is for Stringer Studios. Can you speak to Tyrion promising the Mountain Clansman the Veil? It's not necessarily prophecy, but it is something I'm curious about and whether or not it will be fulfilled. Yeah, this was something I noticed on my reread. The chapters, I'll take it this is a slightly more conceptual level, which I hope you'll understand why in a moment. The chapter that is in is the chapter after he has escaped from the Eyrie. He and Bronn are there. They're going through the mountains of the moon, and a lot of the chapter is conversations with Bronn. And this is conversations about the theme which runs through this chapter, and all of these, almost all of the chapters George R. R. Martin writes, you can view them as short stories. If you read or listen to them just as they are, without charging straight on to the next chapter, you can usually see that there's some sort of arc within each individual chapter. We start off in one place, we have some sort of problem resolution, some sort of problem and leading to some sort of resolution, which may be an actual thing that happens. A lot of the time it's more thematic. This was about keeping your word. Bronn talks about him, whether he keeps his word. Tyrion's there, can I trust you, Bronn? And he talks about how he threw money at Maud, the jailer, because he'd promised to, and Lannister always pays his debts. Bronn says about you, effectively, you owe a debt to your father for what he did to you with your first marriage. There's a tragic story there, and Tyrion doesn't disagree. And at the end of it, he's bargaining with the mountain clans, and he makes a promise. And the theme all the way through this is that Lannister always pays his debts. Tyrion will pay his debts. He promises to give them the veil. That's what he promises. Yes, he's going to give them swords and armor and other things like that, but he promises that he will give them the veil at the end of all of this. And the people he promised are still around. Some of them have gone back to the mountains. Some of them are in the Kingswood at the moment, but they are still around. And Tyrion will come back. I feel sure that at the end, this will come up again. Now, the question is whether that arc within that chapter that leads to Tyrion always pays his debts, actually he doesn't. Sometimes he breaks his word. Sometimes he goes against it. Is that where that's going to end up with? Or is it actually, I am a man of honor, I will do what I said? Because he's done a very similar thing actually all the way over in the Far East outside Meereen. He has promised huge amounts of gold basically for his release from the sellsword company. So he is racking up these debts that he owes to people. Is he going to end up being a person who can keep his word? Is he going to end up with somebody who has to break his word to Daenerys, for example? what does that actually mean? So that's it's a fascinating question. We will see the end of this, but I don't think this necessarily. I don't think it's a prophecy. I think you're very right on that, but we will see this tied in again at the end of Tyrion's story. Oh, and while I remember, simulcasting. If you are watching this here on YouTube, you find it easier to watch on Twitch, you can watch it on Twitch as well. I'm simulcasting over there. I'm paying attention to the comments on YouTube rather than Twitch. But if you would find it easier to watch on Twitch, or if you are on Twitch and just want to follow me over there, then please do that. Songbird's asking, is there a platform where you let everyone know when you are going to live stream? I live stream, well, YouTube is the thing. I live stream every Thursday, same time it's 10 o'clock my time, so that's 5 o'clock Eastern time. The only changes to that are if I take a week off, which I do Christmas and summer normally, just for the sake of my own sanity as much as anything else, or when a TV show is on, I sometimes increase it to do 2. So when Game of Thrones was on, then I would do a pre-show live stream as well. So it's at the same time every week. I think that just means it's slightly easier for everyone to know when these things happen, and I would schedule them in advance. I try to schedule for like a month in advance. If you go onto YouTube and you have a look on live streams, upcoming live streams, you can usually see I think there's only one in there, so you can see what's happening next week, but I will add in a few more after that. So if you're interested in what's coming up, do go and have a look at that. Reflective rambling. This is Rachel Vandervoor. This is from last week. Greek story about Gendel and the cave beyond the wall going all the way to Winterfell. Do you think that will ever come up again? Yes, I do. So Gendel and Gorm are these legendary characters who were wildlings. They were free folk, and they headed south of the wall through this cave system, which went under the wall, apparently. And some of them got lost in there and stayed there forever. But the idea that there are cave systems under the wall, this definitely will come up again. We already know we've got cave systems up by Bloodraven's cave. We know that there are bits underground on the south side of the wall. The Castle Black, just for example, a lot of their time when it's winter, they spend underground. We've got Mole Town just south is underground. That's why it's called Mole Town, because 3/4 of it is underground, like moles live. And so obviously the Night Fort, they had to go down into the well underground in order to go through the Black Gate there. So the imagery all the way through this is that the way through the wall is under it. Now, how is that going to be useful? Might that be how the others get through? I was asked earlier whether the wall is going to come down. I think it will come down. I think that's the most dramatic way. But I think Bran will have to come through the wall, and I think he will come through under the wall. And I think that is what all of that is leading up to. Roman Lakovets saying, off topic, Robert has so much to cover in the near future that I actually hope Winds isn't released this year, which is a crazy thought. I have thought about the Winds of Winter, how crazy it would be if it did come out like when the Lord of the Rings TV show was on. When the Winds of Winter comes out, I will cover it in full. Do not worry. I've come up with a plan in my mind, which obviously who knows when this is going to happen, but I've already decided when I get a release date, I'm finding myself an Airbnb somewhere obscure, just me. I'm going to put Dan into some sort of, he's got a lovely doggy daycare place that he goes. He'll be very happy. And I will just spend as long as it takes reading the book from cover to cover and then start making some videos. I'm really looking forward to it already. It's going to be massive whenever it comes out. So it's not just a thing that you can read in an afternoon. For context, the audiobooks, because I do a lot of when I'm rereading or re-listening to these things. I do it through audiobooks at the moment. The audiobooks for, I think, A Dance with Dragons, a couple of the longer ones, and A Song of Ice and Fire have been nearly 50 hours. So just in terms of listening to it, you've got more than 2 days non-stop listening. And I think this next book is going to be even bigger. So yeah, I will cover this. Do not worry. I'm very excited for whenever The Winds of Winter comes out. George R. R. Martin has been very quiet this year, it has to be said, which is either good news or bad news, I guess. Let's see. Have I got any more questions? I think that's me caught up in the chat quickly. So let's go to Seltz saying, hello, Robert and moderators. As always, keep up the great work. Yes, if you are watching this live, then can you please show a little bit of love to the moderators who do a fantastic job. Moderators, thank you. You are amazing. Patchface, the Ghost of High Heart, Quaithe, Bran, Jojen, Melisandre, Daenerys the Dreamer, Daeron the Drunkard, Daemon the Third, all out of all the characters in the story and the lore, seems to have you find the most captivating and why? Okay. Great question. Because of all of these characters, I think Bran I will put in a slightly different category, because I wouldn't count him as being someone who has prophecies so much as a green seer, which is a slightly different thing. All of these prophetic characters, we think of Maggy the Frog, the Woods Witch, Quaithe, they're mysterious. They're somewhere where we interact with them through one of the characters that we have. We do not know what they're thinking. We do not know what their motivations are. Why is Quaithe saying the things that she's saying to Dany? So there's this level of mystery. Melisandre, now finally we have had a POV chapter from her perspective, and we actually managed to see and understand a little bit about the process of what happens. And we understand, first of all, she's not making this up. She actually genuinely does see things in the flames, and that is, you say, captivating. The moment that we actually get into that is amazing, because we realize that it's not, with Melisandre, it's not that she's a complete fraud. Part of what she does is fraudulent. She accepts that herself in her POV chapter, that she does various things to look more impressive, but she does actually have proper visions. The problem is that she misinterprets them, and that completely shifts our understanding of what Melisandre is. And it's the kind of thing that, because this has been 10 years since that book came out, then kind of the impact of that is lost on us. But the shift from this mysterious person who clearly has got some magical skills, but what's her motivation, what's she trying to do, to suddenly being able to understand her and actually see her doubt. That's the bit that I find absolutely captivating about it. And I'm hoping the structure has been set up for this to be the case, and I'm hoping it will be the case that we get more Melisandre chapters in the first half, at least, of The Winds of Winter. And when I say, pure digression, but when I say the structure has been set up for her to have more POV chapters, the way that George R. R. Martin tells a story, there are certain places that the story is happening that he wants us to see what is happening, and he does that through POV characters. And when the POV character we've been seeing that through their eyes moves on somewhere, he has to have somebody else move in, and we could get a new POV character. This is where Areo-Hota suddenly came up from, which is where Davos suddenly arrives, because we needed to see what was happening over with Melisandre and Stannis. This is why Sir Barristan suddenly started getting POV chapters, because Dany was about to head away on Drogon, and we needed somebody to show us what was happening in Meereen. Melisandre has suddenly got a POV chapter, because when you think about what's going on at the wall, how have we seen what was going on at the wall? Well, we had Sam. Sam has now left. We had Davos. Davos is not there. And John's just been killed. So how are we going to see things at the wall? George R. R. Martin has already set it up. We're going to see things through Melisandre's perspective. I think we will still have John POV chapters, but perhaps not for the first few chapters. If we want to see what happens next at the wall, we're going to see it through Melisandre's eyes. Okay. Kelly Johnson saying, will Dany's life force reignite Lightbringer? I've got a question linked to that coming up a little bit later, Kelly. So if you don't mind, I will pick that question up when I'm talking about the other issue, the broader issue about the prophecies, or the visions really, in the House of the Undying. Cloaked One, picking up a question, thank you. Picking up a question for Jack Myatt. Is there any prophecy around Varys? I'm thinking like the flames and the sorcerer and stuff. Not specifically, in terms of he's not following any prophecies himself, as far as we can tell. We haven't seen this. We've not had a Varys POV chapter, so he remains a bit of a mystery. But in terms of him, we get... There are a couple that probably do refer to him, whether they're visions or prophecies. The perfumed seneschal could refer to a number of different people. This is who Dany is warned about, but it certainly would fit with him. And should she trust him? Well, he's backing a rival claimant for the Iron Throne, so she probably shouldn't trust him. No. So there's that, and also we have the Mummer's Dragon. The dragon is almost certainly here is Fagon, is young Griff, the person claiming to be Aegon VI. This is the Mummer's Dragon because Varys himself was a mummer. That was what he grew up with as a child. He was part of a mummer's troupe, so he was an actor when he was younger. So Varys, the child actor, puts in a slightly different light, but that is what it was. So we've got prophecies, or we've got visions about him, but he himself seems to hate all this stuff. He's somebody who is going for he's not aligned with the Maesters, but it's the same kind of worldview that he seems to want. He wants good governance that doesn't have all of this magic stuff going on. And as we know, he has a personal grudge against a magic user in particular. Reflective Rambling saying he is absolutely and utterly the best. Cloaked One deserves a special medal of honor for how much he contributes to the Deep Geek community. He does. You're very right. Cloaked One, thank you. Creative Branches. Question from Patron. This is actually, while I remember to say this as well, patrons, thank you. This is one of my ways of saying thank you to you, is giving you priority questions for these live streams. If you do wish to support this channel, the best way is through Patreon, and there is a link down in the description. Creative Branches says, in A Dance with Dragons, Daenerys has her period again, reminding me of Mirri Maz Duur's prophecy, claiming that Drogo would return when Dany's womb quickens again. If Dany, Jorah, or anyone makes this connection, how do you think it may influence their actions or beliefs? Could it play into her leading a new horde in Vaes Dothrak, or seeking to become pregnant to give birth to the stallion that mounts the world? Mirri's words for reference: when the sun rises in the west and sets in the east, when the seas go dry and mountains blow in the wind like leaves, when your womb quickens again and you bear a living child, then he will return, and not before. So this is what Mirri Maz Duur says in response to Dany asking when she sees Drogo there lying in this sort of comatose state, effectively. When will he return to me? And she says these things. Now, my take is that I know a lot of people talk about this as a prophecy, My take is this is not a prophecy. My take is that this is just a cruel and poetic way of saying never. When will he come back to you? Never. It's not going to happen. When the sun rises in the west, are we actually going to see that happen in the story? I don't think so. When the seas go dry, no. When the mountains blow in the wind like leaves, these things are never going to happen. And that's my interpretation. This is not a prophecy, not a curse. This is just Miri Mazdur saying the result of what I have just done means that he's never coming back to you. And that is how Dany interprets it as well. She doesn't interpret this as some sort of great prophecy. It's just her saying in a rather cruel way, he's never coming back to you. And by the way, you're never going to have another child. It is a really nasty thing to say. And this is how Dany interprets it, because when she plays it back to herself, what did Miri Mazdur say? The next line is, and the shadows reply back to her, never, never, never. And that's what she internalizes. And later on, when she's thinking about, when she has this political marriage with Hisdar, and she's thinking, I can't have children with him, it's because she's internalized. The point there was never. Now, she does seem to have a period again when she's out into the Dothraki waste. I don't think we can fully confirm that yet, because she took some weird berries. Some of this did seem to be a little bit fever driven, what her thinking was at the time, so we can't be 100% sure on that. But this, in terms of your womb quickens and you bear a living child, this, I think, the initial drive here for Dany is this is going to push her back into that mode of thinking, of being the stallion that mounts the world, her child. And actually they were looking at her when they were delivering that prophecy. And she may well be thinking, I have got children now. She thinks this all the time. She says, maybe Miri Mazdur says it right, I won't have any children, but I do have children now. The dragons, Drogon is my child. And so that is what's going to be in her thinking when she goes back to Vaes Dothrak. She's going to be playing this back through her memory, all of this. She's going to be thinking, Drogo is coming back to me, my womb is quickening, my child is here, we can do something here. And this is where I think we will see her taking control, as happened on the show. I think it will happen in quite a similar way in the books. She will personally take control of the Dothraki, and she will pull them all into one Khalasar, and she will effectively be the stallion who mounts the world with her child Drogon. And that is what is sort of her forcing the prophecy. So this is another spin on what we've got here, is that she may well even think that prophecy didn't happen, but I will make it happen. I am the person who controls my own fate. I am the person who's going to do this. All of the imagery is there. We last see her staring west, a blood bruise in the sky to the west. This is all her taking on the Dothraki horde. And even when you read the Winds of Ice and Fire, I'm so focused on the Winds of Winter, the World of Ice and Fire, even in there you get the Maester who's writing it says, someday maybe somebody will unite all of these different Khalasars and bring them west across the sea, and that would be horrendous. So there's a sort of a little bit of, we were talking about foreshadowing last time, a little bit of foreshadowing there as well. So that, I think, is what the link is going to be. I think that she is going to try and force this, and she's going to say, that couldn't happen on the terms that it should have done. I will make this happen on my terms. Dany is going to take a darker turn. Not my words, this is what George R. R. Martin is saying in the next book. Question from Sina Jensen saying, "Hi Robert, what an interesting subject. Where do you think prophecy comes from in A Song of Ice and Fire? Are they sent from the weirwoods, from law, from somewhere else?" I think lots of different places is the answer. So yes to those and more. I think that there are the weirwood network clearly exists from our perspective outside of time. They see things in the past and in the future. Time is irrelevant to a weirwood tree. So therefore, if you get prophecies through the weirwoods and therefore through green seeing and things along those lines, it is you're getting it from the earth, you're getting it from the planet itself, you're getting it from the weirwoods. So that is where that comes from. Some prophecies, I think, come from people who are they are pushing it. They're trying to make these things. They're trying to push their own agenda, is what I'm trying to say. So Quaithe, I think, is a fascinating example here. We do not know what Quaithe's agenda is, but we can start to see it. We can see that she is trying to, what she is trying to make Dany do. And what she is trying to make Dany do is, remember who you are, Daenerys Targaryen. The dragons know, do you? Fire and blood, she keeps on. This is what she's wanting. She's wanting Dany to regain her Targaryenness, her fire and bloodness, her Aegon the Conqueror-ness. That is where she is trying to push her. And so the prophecies that she has about beware the perfumed seneschal, beware this, beware that, that is her not so much prophesying about the future, but saying, here's a list of people who could knock you off track. Be wary of them. So some of it is people who magically see things around and use that in a sort of a prophetic manner. Others do, it's left a little bit vague with, so R'hllor, do the gods exist? George R. R. Martin's never going to tell us. It's never going to be revealed in any way. There certainly is a source into magic that allows you to see into the future in some way. It's not just R'hllor. The House of the Undying, they certainly see visions of the future. Patchface seems to see something of the future. It's all over the place. And if you have a grand unifying theory of magic within A Song of Ice and Fire, and who doesn't have a grand unifying theory of magic within A Song of Ice and Fire, it has to come down. There is magic. It is a magical world, and the magic is out there, and people tap into it in different ways, and they understand it in different ways. But it's not just like, here's this type of magic, and here's this type of magic, and here's this type of magic. There is a magical ambience in the world that people seem to be able to tap into. Okay, let's go to Lauren Mintz saying, I have two questions. Let's do the first one first. The first is about Dany's dream lover from the boat in a Storm of Swords. Was this a dragon dream of the future, or was it, as Dany sees it, just a dream memory of Drogo? I think Dany has lots of sexy dreams, let's put it that way, which kind of fits with her character. She seems that seems to be quite a big part of who she is as a person. What that particular one there was, that a dream memory of Drogo, quite possibly. I think one of them, she has a figure with shadows over their face. There's another one with blue lips and an ice cold member, I think is what she calls it. So that she has lots of these different kind of sexy dreams. Are they prophetic? Well, there are hints of them being prophetic in there, it has to be said. But I think that they build on her memories of the lovers she's had in the past. So definitely we have Dario and we have Drogo in there as well. Andrew K saying, I think that the fact that magic users of different mediums often foretell the same events and at times see each other in visions hints at a magical nexus and or a common source. Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Second question from Lauren Mintz saying, in the House of the Undying, Dany is told that she would light 3 fires, take 3 mounts, and have 3 treasons. Which of these do you think have already happened? And of the ones that have yet to happen, what do you predict they'll mean? Well, this is a huge question. I did do a video on this, and this, I think Kelly Johnson asked a bit earlier. I will tell you my response to that question here as well. So you can interpret these things in many, many different ways. She has lots of visions. She goes into the House of the Undying. She has, first of all, a whole series of things that kind of reassure her of that this is real. This is seeing things that she knows are there. Some of them are slightly more esoteric, but it's reassuring us as the reader that these things are real. Then she has a whole load of flickering through images just quickly, like flashing through, flash, 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 image, 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 image. And then we also get this kind of words intoning over the top from the Undying, saying things like you will light 3 fires, once for life, once for death, once for love. You will take 3 mounts, once to bed, once to dread, and once to love. You will know 3 treasons, once for blood, once for gold, once for love. And you can do a lot. And if you go back and have a look at the video I did called Will Jon Kill Daenerys, or something along those lines, from 4 years ago, I would say, before season 8 happened, certainly. And I drew out from that a conclusion that of these things we're talking about here, the 3 fires, you've asked, what have we seen? What have we yet to see? That she's definitely, Dany lights lots of fires, but most of the time through her dragons. The times when she personally lights them herself, she lights the funeral pyre for Drogo that brings to life her 3 dragons. We expect one of the flashing images we have seems to be echoing what we saw on the TV show about what happens in Vaes Dothrak when she burns down. Effectively, she burns down the home of the Dosh Khaleen, and then everybody sort of bows down before her. That is a fire that she lit herself. So that strikes me as probably the first fire for life, bringing the dragons to life. The second one for death, bringing death to the Dosh Khaleen, to the Dothraki. Sorry, just checking. Greek Weirwood saying, is it possible to slow-mo midstream? Good question. Let me just do this very quickly. So apologies if you are watching this live. I will see whether I can go to change this to slow mode midstream. If I can find where this is. I'm not sure that I can. I do apologize for that. No, here we go. I'm going to put this one onto slow mode. Apologies for the delay on that. Hopefully that will now pick up in the chat. So I've put that one onto slow mode for 25 seconds. I was talking, however, apologies for the delay. I was talking, however, about these 3 fires. So the first one is life. That's the fire that brought about the life for her dragons. The second one is death. That's with the Dothraki. The third one for love. I don't think we've had that yet. 3 mounts to bed. Clearly, this, I think, is her white horse that she has. That it's quite important in book 1. She has quite a strong bond with that. This is the one that she gets given by Drogo, and it's to bed. This is to her wedding bed. She rides it there. The second to Dread. This, I think, is very clearly Drogon, which she is a mount that she is riding, and Drogon is the echo of Balerion the Black Dread. So I think very clearly that is Dread. So to Love, the third, we haven't really got a third mount that we've seen, so I think we have to hold off on that. Three Treasons, well, you could interpret these in a million different ways. This is probably the hardest one to interpret. She definitely got betrayed by Miri Mazdur, as we've seen. She definitely has been betrayed by Ser Jorah. Now, for blood, Miri Mazdur, perhaps that makes sense because everybody was killed. All of her people were killed. That was what caused that betrayal. For gold, now Jorah didn't, he was paid, but he seems to have done it more for the opportunity to get back into the good books of the Iron Throne and get his place back in Westeros, but gold was part of it. And then there's for love, which doesn't seem to have happened. So that's where I think where I think the state of play is on those things there, which leaves an intriguing coincidence that the third fire that she will light is for love. The third mount that she will take is to love, and the third treason is for love. So it's love, and I think that is what is going to, that there has to be a link between those three. So the third ones, and I think this has to be the culmination of her story in some way, and I think the link between them is going to be Jon. I think that there will be the treason if he does indeed kill her, as he did on the TV show, and I think there's evidence in the books that he might do, then that would be a treason. And if there's a mount, might she, in the books, this would be fantastic if this happened, might she ride a Ghost to him? That would be amazing. Pure speculation. I haven't seen any hints, but it would kind of make sense. And then lighting a fire. This is where Kelly Johnson's question comes in. We do have an echo, a story about Lightbringer. How is Lightbringer forged to start with? By Azor Ahai stabbing his lover. And what do we know about Lightbringer is it's a fiery sword. So all of that kind of ties up in some way. It's horrible, but it does sort of tie up. But the bit that I can be sure on, I think, is what some of those things have happened and what some of those things have not happened. David Thomas, thank you so much for the super chat, saying no question, but many thanks for all that you do and share with us. C. McBroom saying George R. R. Martin calls Tyrion a villain in one interview. Could he be the treason for blood if he ends up betraying her to get Castle Rock? Yeah, absolutely. So I think the treason, as I say, is the one that is the hardest to pin down for sure, because whereas, yes, Miri Mazdur and Jorah both have betrayed her, the match up to blood and gold isn't 100% sure. For Tyrion betraying her, and I think there's a fair chance that he might at the end, what would it be for? Would it be for gold? I mean, that's Castle Rock is linked with gold, so that's entirely possible. So it's the vaguest one. Yes, I think it's very possible. Konitsky saying Jorah is not for gold. Yeah, I think that's the weakest one out of all of that. I think that there's a lot to be said for other options in that one. Rocket Moose, was Jorah really a betrayal? It's a good question. Was it? Certainly not to start with. But the fact that he didn't sort of own up to it, she feels betrayed. It has to be said. Cloaked One saying, just saluting our mods, doing fine work as always. Moderators, thank you. I can see that there's quite a few things that you're having to shoot down out there, so thank you very much for doing that. Do let me know, mods, in the chat if there's anything, if you need me to do slow mode for even further, then I will do that. Kyle D. Tommaso saying, this is my first time catching a video live. Excellent. Well, welcome, Kyle. It's a very different experience. Thank you so much for all of your hard work. I love listening to your Traveller's Guide to Westeros. Looking forward to your coverage of the Rings of Power. Thank you very much indeed. I do appreciate that, and welcome. And if this is your first time watching this live, then a particular welcome to you. Do go and say hello to people in the chat. Just to round off Lauren Mint's question, saying, on a similar note, I heard an interesting theory that the treasons are not going to occur to her, not going to occur to her, but by her. For example, she betrayed Viserys in Vaes Dothrak by standing by and watching Drogo kill her. She later dreams of Viserys visiting her, where he tells her that she betrayed him, not the other way round. Not sure if that is true, but I do like looking at Song of Ice and Fire prophecies in different ways. It is what is so fun about these books. Yeah, so as I say, the treasons one is the one that is the hardest to pin down, and I love this idea. She did betray Viserys. Now, we can probably say that this was entirely understandable, and we can probably say that this is fair. He was abusive in the extreme, but he was her brother and he was her king, and so her turning on him was a betrayal. So what was that for? Was that for blood? Possibly. Because he did hit her and draw blood, and so we could easily say that that is a betrayal for blood. And although it on the TV show they sort of basically implied this was Drogo doing his thing and Dany just sort of stood by and let it happen. In the books, when you read between the lines, it is a lot clearer. She gives her implicit permission for this to happen. She's there and she sort of, I can't remember the exact phraseology, but she nods and says, yeah, okay. So this is her betraying. It's not just the situation was out of her control. Okay, Andrew Case saying the slow mode is working. Excellent, thank you. Remy Sparkle Muffin over on Patreon saying, hi Robert, in prophecies characters are sometimes represented by their sigils. I'm thinking about Littlefinger. Are there any prophecies that involve a mockingbird? I know there's the one about Sansa slaying a giant in a snow castle. That's often thought to be about his family sigil of the Titan of Braavos. Yes. So, no, off the top of my head, I can't think of any to do with mockingbirds. But this is a fascinating one, because this is a question from. Sorry, a question. This is something that the Woods Witch says, and the Woods Witch we kind of believe, because she does seem to get a lot of things right, and she just sort of rattles off this whole series of prophecies. And what she talks about is, amongst other things, I dreamt of a maid at a feast with purple serpents in her hair, venom dripping from their fangs. This is Sansa at the purple wedding, because the poison was in her hairnet. And later I dreamt of that maid again, slaying a savage giant in a castle built of snow. And that seems to be looking very much at the scene much later in the Eyrie, when Sansa builds a snow castle of Winterfell. And then she's playing effectively, there's this doll, Robin Arryn is there as well, and this doll gets destroyed by her, and that is the cause of a huge amount of rumpus at the time. But it has a simple message, which is Sansa clearly is now starting to miss Winterfell. Her story arc starts with her wishing to be away from Winterfell, and it will end with her feeling that Winterfell is her place and that's her safe place. So this is an important stepping stone along the way. But the idea of this huge giant this Titan being destroyed by her in Winterfell does seem to imply, as this is in a series of prophecies rather than just a random thing I saw happening over there, this does seem to imply perhaps it is her who's going to be killing Littlefinger in Winterfell, which works. That seems to be a very likely thing to happen. A question from Evan Berkowitz saying, prepare D to J. One day you shall have from my hands a longsword like none the world has ever seen, dragon forged and made of Valyrian steel. Prophecy or blood magic to wake dragons, so prophecy needs blood. So I'm trying to work out who this is saying this. I might make this or something I will come back to next time, so I've not got an immediate answer to that one. So thank you very much for the super chat. I shall make a note for that, and at the top of next week's stream I will quickly answer that one. Jewel Elson, thank you very much for the super sticker saying good job, thank you. And Ultraviolence saying just a cheers to Robert for ever being the gentleman when talking about Dany's sexy dreams. Well, yeah, one tries one's best. Danny to Jorah. There we go. Maybe I can answer this one. So, one day you shall have from my hands a longsword like none the world has ever seen, dragon forged and made of Valyrian steel. So I can't remember the exact context, but I think that this is basically him saying, when I get back and claim Bear Island, then I will let you have the family sword, and I will offer it up unto you. Now, I think that's what that is, even though that is a bastard sword, and rather than a long sword, dragon forged and made of Valyrian steel. I think that's what it was. But as I said, I will come back to this next time. I think that is him showing off to Dany rather than him doing a prophecy. He's not really a prophetic kind of guy. Mara Lee saying, one of the most famous prophecies in A Song of Ice and Fire is the one about Azor Ahai. Why is this prophecy such a fun one for fans to discuss? Who do you think it is about? Jon Snow, Dany, or a different character altogether? So this is, clearly this is a central prophecy. I think it's so fun for two reasons. The first reason is that it clearly is central. This is a story about who's going to save the world. And actually, if we could understand, this comes into how George R. Martin does prophecies, if we could understand who it was, then we would understand where this story is going a whole lot better. So it feels important. But secondly, this is one of those frustrating things. I've said it a few times in different ways in this live stream. George R. Martin doesn't like to just give us, here's a straight prophecy, this is what's going to happen. He finds a different way each time is to make it slightly more complicated. Here's one with maybe the interpretation of a word is a bit wrong. Here's one that maybe we suspect that the person might be misinterpreting it. And here's one where maybe the person has an agenda and they're trying to push something. Here's one where we're told straight away some of these won't be true. Here, we never actually really see the prophecy. This is the amazing thing about Azor Ahai Reborn, is we get the characters who clearly know what this prophecy is. They just kind of like talk to each other. You know about this prophecy? Yeah, of course I know about this prophecy. Melisandre's there saying, do you know this prophecy of the prince that was promised? And Maester Aemon's going, oh yeah, being born amongst fire, salt and smoke. And of course I know this prophecy. But it's like, it's shorthand. We've never actually seen written down what this actual prophecy is. And even when you go back to the legend itself of Azor Ahai, we don't even have that, really. We've got the legend in quite a lot of detail of how Azor Ahai forged his magical sword, Lightbringer. We've got that bit. But what did he do once he had it? He went off and saved the world. How? What did he do? We don't know. We're not even told. So Azor Ahai and the Principles Promised is fascinating in my view. Anyway, it's fascinating because George R. R. Martin hasn't even told us what this promise is, other than the fact this is the promised savior who will save the world. That's it. And it's so George R. R. Martin. Just keep it as vague as you like. There's no. We've got some things that you could interpret in a number of different ways. Born amidst salt and smoke. Well, let's interpret that as being born on Dragonstone, or let's interpret that as being born at Summerhall, or let's interpret that as anything you want. You can take it any which way. A red comet, is it supposed to be a red comet when you're born, when you're being reborn, as Melisandre then says about Stannis? You can interpret it in many, many different ways. So why I personally find it's a fun one is that people have different views on this, and all of these views are absolutely fine. All of them can be justified. You can take what you want. We will still be discussing this after the whole story has finished. Londoc 20 saying, hello, Robert. First and foremost, I would like to commend you on never having to take bathroom breaks on these live streams. Even though they can go on for hours and you are constantly drinking water. I'm constantly sipping water. That is my trick. I had a couple of prophecies for you. First, the High Septon during the conquest was said to have prayed what to do in regards to Aegon, and was shown by the crone that Old Town would be destroyed if they didn't open their gates. My question is, do you really think Aegon would have destroyed Old Town? This would mean Aegon would be okay with destroying the Citadel, which holds centuries of knowledge. Do you think he would really have been okay with it? That's a really interesting question. And I know, Mara Lee, you also were asking about that. I think we need to, first of all, query whether or not that actually was what happened. Not in terms of the high level that in comes Aegon the Conqueror, and he's going to come to Old Town, and then the High Septon goes off and thinks about things for a day and comes back and they decide the High Towers, let's open the gates. That, I think, is clear. Whether he prayed to the gods and the gods revealed something to him, I think, is not necessarily the case. The High Towers are the arch survivors, the arch political pragmatists. They will have been deciding what do we do. They will have seen what happened. They will have seen the Field of Fire, Harrenhal. We're going to let these guys in. They would be destroyed otherwise. So that's the situation. If the crone really did appear, then this is one of the very few times we've had experience of the Faith of the Seven actually being prophetically working, magically working. So that's I don't think it's necessary. Would Aegon have burnt it down? I think he would have probably taken out the High Tower and he would have taken out bits of Old Town, but whether he would have burned the library, I do not know. Cloaked One saying good night to you. I hope you have a good week. Mods, I see you're doing an excellent job again. Thank you very much. 444. I had a second question there from Londoc 20. What are your thoughts on Jon's dreams about him in an empty Winterfell and the crypts? Thank you, sir. Yeah, Jon talks about having a recurring dream. He tells Sam about this. Sometimes we see it. And the details change a little bit from time to time, but roughly it's the same. He's in Winterfell and he's walking around and it's empty. He's looking for someone or something. And he comes to the crypts, and each time we hear this, like a little bit more gets revealed. So first time he's just looking around and he ends up the crypts, and then he goes down a bit, and then he ends up going all the way down into the crypt, and it's just like he almost like he's being led. He goes down into the crypts and he thinks that the thing he's searching for is down there, but he is not himself welcome down there. But then he sort of keeps on going, and then the statues are there and they're sort of judging him. This is not your place, etc. So it's what are we to make of this? Well, it's almost as if he's being shown who he is. It's almost as if he's been shown, you're not a Stark. However, there is something you need to learn here. And he will almost certainly end up at the statue of Lyanna Stark. That is what he must learn there. What do I make of it? When in doubt, blame Bloodraven. I think this is not a prophetic dream on Jon's part. I think this is Bloodraven who is guiding Jon to understand who he is. 444. Hi, Robert. It looks that in A Song of Ice and Fire, the most important thing is how characters interact with prophecies and not if any prophecy is actually true. Agreed. I think that we as fandom frequently overhype on their accuracy. What is your view on this? Is there any particular overhyped prophecy, or maybe opposite, any frequently overlooked? So I think the overhyped one is the one I've talked about already, and Azor Ahai. I say it's overhyped because fundamentally I do not think that the prophecy will matter. I do not think that who we decide is Azor Ahai is actually going to make a difference. I think that people will, the point is that lots of people will have lots of different ideas about this. That is what it is. So overhyped, probably that, because we simply do not know what this prophecy is. So it's hard to know what level of hype to have about it, I guess. Is there anything that is frequently overlooked? I mean, I was trying to think about this. I think we've covered a huge amount here. I think that the things that I would say, they're not overlooked, but perhaps they're not given the credence that they should, is that there are 3 or 4 places that seem pretty strong. As in, the Woods Witch seems pretty right. We should trust what the Woods Witch says. Maggy the Frog seems pretty right. We should trust what Maggy the Frog says. The visions in the House of the Undying seem pretty good, apart from a couple of obvious ones, which are futures which were not going to happen. They seem pretty strong as well. And I think that it's not that they're overlooked, it's just that I think we need to place a lot more emphasis on these will happen. How will they transpire? How will they happen is the question. Catherine Furseth saying, hi, Robert, great topic. I would like you to walk us through the meaning of Jaime's weirwood dream, which most readers seem to take as prophetic. George R. R. Martin uses known literary themes such as darkness, light, shadow, etc. How do you understand the meaning of this dream? Regret and guilt on Jaime's part over all the deaths he didn't prevent, and perhaps the vows he didn't keep, represented by the dead people he dreams about, like Arthur Dayne, Rhaegar, etc. The known dead people dressed like winter coming for him. And how about the Lannisters he sees? Most of them dead now except Cersei. And the notable exception he doesn't see is Tyrion, meaning he will survive. And perhaps most of all, Brienne. In this light, she seemed beautiful. She looked like a knight, he thinks. And what is the meaning of the flaming swords? His is going out while Brienne's is the last one staying lit. What about their deaths? Okay, so a lot of questions, and this is a big dream sequence, a big vision. For the context of where this appears in the story, this is, it takes place when Jaime sleeps for the night with his head on a weirwood tree stump. He has left Harrenhal. He has left Brienne there. He is heading down to King's Landing. He's going back, effectively, he's going back to Cersei. He has left Brienne there. After this, and this is a really important point, he changes his mind and he goes back to get Brienne. And there is an element there that is very strong when he and Brienne are down there. I'll talk you through the actual dream in just a moment, but he and Brienne are down there, and Brienne in the dream says, what is here? Is there a bear here? And obviously when he gets back to Harrenhal, that's where he finds her fighting the bear, and he goes in and saves her. So this brought about a change for Jaime. So the dream is basically that he finds himself in Casterly Rock, which he knows. Some shadowy figures with spears sort of push him downwards, deeper down underground. He thinks, no, I need to be going upstairs. That's where all of the chambers that I know are, but no, he's been taken downstairs to a chamber that he does not know. He basically dropped in this pit. And his father and Cersei and all the Lannisters, you're right, Tyrion isn't mentioned, are all there. And he's saying, where is this place? This is your place. And this is, he says, at least give me a sword. I don't know what's going on here. And Tywin says, I have given you a sword. He's got this sword. His sword he draws, and it's got this kind of flickering blue flame on. Brienne appears next, and he frees her from her shackles, and she gets a sword as well. And then we get this Cersei, who sort of turns around and he sort of says basically what's going on. And she says, this is your place. The flames will burn. This is a direct quote. The flames will burn so long as you live. When they die, so must you. So we're told that this is the point. This is the crux of what's going on here. He's got the flames. He's got a sword with flames on. When the flames die out, he dies. Then we get a whole load of people coming to start accusing him of stuff. It is Rhaegar, and it is the knights of the Kingsguard who are there accusing him of breaking his oath. He broke his oath to protect the king. He killed the king. He broke his oath to look after the Rhaegar's children. He broke this oath. He broke that oath. And as they are saying these things, his flame went out, starts going out. Brienne starts coming in with saying things like, I've made an oath as well. I've made an oath to Catelyn Stark, and Rhaegar's there saying we've all made oaths like this. But whereas Brienne's sword keeps its flame going, the flame on Jaime's, as he's told again and again and again of all of these oaths that he's broken, the flame goes out, and he remembers what Cersei said. And what Cersei said was, the flame will burn so long as you live. When it dies, so must you. Brienne's is still fine. And that's the point at which he feels a hand choking his throat, and then he wakes up. So what is this about? Well, the story impetus is clearly he then immediately goes off and goes back and gets Brienne. But this makes him start to think about oath keeping. He has broken his oaths, and you start to see these changes in behavior from him. When he gets a sword, what does he call it? Oath keeper. He is keeping oaths from now on. He has made an oath to Catelyn Stark to find Sansa. He decides he's going to give that. He can't do it himself, but he gives that task to Brienne because he does not want to break his oath. His father says, right, now we've got Robert Baratheon out of the way, you can leave the Kingsguard. And he says, no, I don't want to break my oath to being a member of the Kingsguard. Suddenly, Jaime wanting to keep the oaths that he makes. And so that is the big shift we've got there. So it's if this is prophetic, what we've got is Jaime on this arc of now starting to keep his oaths, and when he breaks his oaths, that's when he is going to die. That is the message that we're getting here. He is going back onto the right path. He is trying to keep his oaths, but when he breaks an oath, that is when he's going to die. When's he going to break an oath? Well, we shouldn't take the TV show as exactly what's going to happen, but at a very high level, the big beats, as George R. Martin said, the big beats of the story will be the same. He eventually ends up with Brienne and then leaves her. He breaks an oath, and soon after that, he dies. If you are looking for any kind of foreshadowing that Jaime will go back to Cersei, it is here in this vision as well. All the way through it, he is thinking, how do I follow Cersei? Perhaps if Brienne can sort of help lift me up, I can climb up to where she was, and then I can follow her. And even the method of death that he feels, a hand around his throat, echoes what the prophecy that Cersei has had from the Valonqar of having somebody choke her. So, and we know that they both think that when one of them leaves this earth, the other one will as well. So there's a huge amount in here that we can unpack, but the heart of this is about oaths. The heart of this is that Jaime beforehand broke oaths, and afterwards he's committed to keeping them. But if we take this as a prophecy, when he breaks his oaths, that's when he's going to die. Okay, JJ saying, huge fan of your videos, excellent narration and content, audiobook quality, thank you. From a fellow Lord of the Rings fan who was lucky to old enough to watch the originals in the cinema. Yeah, I'm lucky to be old enough to have watched the original trilogy in the cinema as well. And just on a very brief Lord of the Rings thing, the feeling that I have right now, I've no idea whether this is going to be the same. I will always be honest about how I feel about this. The same kind of nervous but hopeful excitement that I had before the Lord of the Rings films in the cinema, or seeing the original Lord of the Rings films in the cinema, that's how I'm feeling right now. I can see they're making changes to the lore in terms of the timeline. That's the biggest thing that I'm concerned about. But if they get it right, this is going to be amazing. That's all I'm going to say on Lord of the Rings, because I've spoken a lot about it in the last couple of live streams. Reflective Rambling saying, if Roberts scooched up to the screen a little bit, he would manage another stream with a wig. So yeah, I was thinking that maybe I do look a bit like Maggy the Frog. That's my Maggy the Frog face, by the way. Okay, so we've got a question from Mara Lee. If you're just listening to this, by the way, you've no idea. The picture behind me is of Maggy the Frog, and my head is roughly where Maggy the Frog's head is. Mara Lee saying, in Maggy the Frog's, perfect, seamless. In Maggy the Frog's prophecy to Cersei, she warned her that one day she would be replaced by a younger, more beautiful queen that would someday cast her down and take all she held most dear. On the TV show, it ended up being Dany with the help of Drogon. Do you think it will be Sansa, Dany, or someone else? So I think it will actually, I talked a little bit about this in relation to Brienne a bit earlier, but I want to just add in here that I think it will be one of those things that we can see it being many different ways. I think that the fundamental thing, all she holds most dear, the taking away Jaime thing, is definitely going to be there. But I think in terms of who is it who kills her children, I think they may all be killed by younger, more beautiful women. I think that's entirely possible. If you say that Sansa, unbeknownst to her, played her part in the death of Joffrey, we think we've got two Sand Snakes heading to a King's Landing at the moment. almost certainly thinking of killing some Lannisters when they get there. I think that is entirely possible. I think that in terms of taking all she holds dear, I think that Marjorie has indeed taken a huge sort of chunk of the people's love, if she ever cared about that. In terms of who's going to take it, a younger, more beautiful person, then Dany is coming across and will ultimately take the throne. I think whether she will hold it is a different matter, but we have the complication of Fagon in the middle. So this is one of those things where I think the answer is all of the above, and possibly a few extras. Caius Ballerina, picking up a question for Chris Grant, thank you. Do you think that George R. R. Martin treats oaths and their significance similarly to Tolkien, i.e. the Oath of Feanor? Oh, now this is interesting. So Tolkien treated oaths very seriously within his world. He never actually said specifically about the link across between oaths and magic and destiny, but certainly when you have like the Dead Men of Dunharrow, for example, if you think back to the films, all those ghostly characters who Aragorn sort of summoned them to fulfill their oath. This is because many years earlier they had sworn to do what the King of Gondor says, and had broken that oath. And now Aragorn's saying, well, you were stuck here because you broke your oath, but I am the rightful King of Gondor, so follow me, I will consider you to have met your oath. And they were bound, their fate was bound to that oath. And you say the Oath of Feanor, certainly that seemed to bind people further back in the story. That seemed to bind the Noldor to tragedy as much as anything else. So does George R. R. Martin treat it in that way? I personally think no. I think that he will, the Jaime thing that I was talking through, his weirwood vision, I think that is very much a matter of, for him, that is the central part of who he is as a story. And we have to make the link across, and I'm sure that he will make this slightly more explicit at some point. Tyrion, we were talking about earlier, who made the promise to the Vale clans. Lannister always keeps his word, always keeps his promises. That always pays his debts. That is in sharp contrast to where Jaime was. Jaime is now becoming more like Tyrion. Are they going to go the same way? It's not 100% sure. But does he treat the oaths in the same way? No, in the sense that Tolkien treated them as having some kind of magical binding effect on people, whereas George R. R. Martin sees them more as a test of character that may have some ironic and occasionally tragic circumstances attached. Question from Reflective Rambling, saying, if anyone sees long-time chatter and supporter of the channel, Mattia, I think that must be Mattia Dominique, on the 19th, please wish him a happy name day. Mattia, happy name day for the 19th. Where are we at the moment? That's tomorrow. Yes, I've turned into tomorrow here just while I was looking. So in a couple of days' time. But happy birthday. I hope you have a fantastic day. Mara, no, I just did that one. Let's go to another question from Mara Lee. This is saying, when talking about prophecies, George R. R. Martin said, prophecies are, a double-edged sword. You have to handle them carefully. I mean, they can add depth and interest to a book, but you don't want to be too literal or too easy. What do you think George meant by that statement? I think, and this is the reason I put this towards the end of the stream, I've still got another question from one of my patrons, but now is a great time to drop some questions into the chat. I will pick up as many of them as I can. But in terms of how he uses prophecies, is that he likes them. He did so when he says they're double-edged sword. He then gives the reasons why you have to be wary of using them. But he clearly wants to include them because he can see, as you say, they can add depth and interest, because they make you think, is this going to happen? How is this going to happen? When? Why is this going to happen? They add a degree of faux certainty, I would say, to a huge amount of the plot that's going forward that George R. R. Martin does not want us to have. He wants us to always be on the edge of our seats. Could this character die? Could that end up in a dead end? Could that mean nothing? And so he says you don't want to be too literal or too easy. So too easy is for them to just happen without actually meaning anything. This is just effectively that takes away all of the danger within a book. That takes away all of the chances of you not succeeding. If you think that this is a world in which a prophecy happens and everything will just flow through to make that prophecy real, you are living in a world that has no actual free choice, and the story is just telling us what happened rather than feeling that we are in the story in some way. The too literal thing, I think, is something that he loves and he plays with all the way through. Should you take it too literally? A lot of the time he deliberately makes his prophecies vague. Who is the Valonqar? What does Valonqar actually mean? When we're talking about the Valonqar shall wrap his hands around your throat, is this literal hands, or is just figuratively this is what is going to be happening? Is this, when might this happen? He's wanting always is the we shouldn't literally interpret this, because he said once you have drowned in your tears, she's not literally going to drown in her tears, or is she? I mean, probably not. This is flowery language. He does not want things to be literal or easy. So this is what we have. We've got this tapestry of prophecies, most of which are probably going to come true, but the manner in which they come true is open for grabs. Question from Lady of Summer saying, are the sequence of events leading to the tragedy at Summerhall what Dany ultimately creates at Drogo's funeral pyre? Aegon saw what needed to be done, but Dany succeeded. Well, this is a very interesting one. So George R. R. Martin, the tragedy at Summerhall, for those who are unaware, this was when Aegon V, Egg from the Duncan Egg stories, he wanted to hatch some dragon eggs, and he thinks he'd figured out how to do it. So he gets some dragon eggs, he gets some ancient manuscripts from Ashai, he gets some pyromancers. We don't know the details of what happened, but there was a massive fire and lots of people died. George R. R. Martin says that what happened with Dany and the hatching of the three eggs was this confluence of everything being exactly right. She knew what she was doing. She had the fire. She had the sacrifices that were there. There was a red comet above. Everything was just right. The stars aligned exactly right for her. Was that the same with what happened at Summerhall? Well, clearly no, because the dragon eggs that were there did not hatch and dragons were not born. But when you say Aegon saw what needed to be done, but Dany succeeded, the one difference that is there is, if you buy into this theory that I do, that the Maesters, following the Dance of the Dragons, they poisoned the dragon eggs, which is why we get lots of small deformed dragons born straight after the Dance of the Dragons. Then you say, so that's why they weren't born. None of these eggs hatched because of that. But the three that Dany got were not poisoned, because those were the three that Alyssa Farman stole before the Dance of the Dragons, sold to Braavos. So that all kind of makes sense. The bit that I would say, though, is a clear echo is that we get what happened literally with Dany's funeral pyre happened figuratively with Summerhall, by which I mean Dany hatched some dragons, and there were sacrifices with those dragons. This was a funeral pyre. People died, but there were sacrifices. Drogo died. Rhaegar died. Mirri Maz Dur died. Drogo's horse died. So there were, take your pick, but let's say there were 3 humans which died as sacrifices, allowing, because everything needs sacrifice as well as intention, and when it comes to magic in the Song of Ice and Fire, that was what allowed the dragons to be hatched and born. What happened in Summerhall? Well, we also had lots of people died, but we are told of 3 people in particular who died at Summerhall. The king died, king's blood. The king's eldest son died, king's blood. And then also Dunk, so Duncan the Tall, died. Was he king's blood? No, but right from the very first Dunk and Egg story, a prince, the heir to the throne, died for him, so that Dunk would stay alive. This is Prince Maekar. He died for Dunk, and so Dunk is constantly thinking, how is my life worth that of a prince, of the heir to the realm? And this suddenly makes, symbolically, he's also king's blood. So what do we have? We have 3 king's blood sacrifices, 3 magical sacrifices, and a huge fire, and someone is born. Rhaegar is born. Figuratively, sacrifice, intention, fire, blood, and a dragon is born. So what happened literally with Dany did happen figuratively with Aegon and the tragedy at Summerhall, which is all part of why Maester Aemon and then later Rhaegar himself thought that Rhaegar might be the prince that was promised. Kelly Johnson saying, will Jon kill wannabe God King Euron? Yeah, I covered this last time under the foreshadowing one. I think there's a fair chance that he might do in the way that, it's hard to say this without it sounding like it's fan fiction, but I think that there is some foreshadowing for it, which is Jon and Euron fighting on Dragonback above the God's Eye Lake, and I think Jon winning. Reflective Rambling saying, is it possible to get a shout out for Heidi, Costume CO's Rings of Power stream starting at 8 EST? Yes, I don't know when that is. That must be starting up 3/4 of an hour. For those who don't know, I'm very happy to. Heidi is an excellent person. Costume CO is the channel. I'm sure that somebody will put a link, if you're watching this live, somebody will put a link in the chat. If you want an expert on all things to do with costume in TV and film, then she is the person. And so she will be, in fact, I may well, when I finish doing this, I may well tune in myself if she's doing a breakdown of the Rings of Power costumes. Then we will be able to learn a lot about what they're trying to tell us about these characters through the costumes that they've got. So she's an absolute expert on it. It's not just about, oh, what fabric is this? It's actually about character as well, and what we can learn about the story through that. So I happily will give a shout out there. Alison De Silva, thank you very much, saying, do you think it might be possible that others know about the Azor Ahai prophecy? Well, if you mean others as in other people than the people that we know about, yes, this is definitely something that all of the priests of law will be at least vaguely aware of. If you're talking about the others, is it possible that they know about the Azor Ahai prophecy? I mean, I've heard this go round a few times, this idea that they are, or maybe they're moving because they think that the Azor Ahai reborn is about to be reborn, and they need to do something about this. We've got no indication that they've had any interactions with humanity for thousands of years. So I think the short answer is probably not. What they will know is what Azor Ahai, from the first time round, Azor Ahai did, which is more than we do. And they will therefore be on the lookout for someone who does the same again. Because without some great magical heroic intervention, the others were always going to win because they are superior to humans. Every time a human dies, they raise it up and it's on their side. You cannot easily. They're stronger than humans. They faster. They bring the cold, which makes it harder for humans to be fighting, even living and surviving. They are superior in terms of fighting machines. So they will be aware of what happened last time, and they will be keeping an eye out. But whether they're aware of the prophecy, I think, is a very different matter. Caius, no, who was it? Yes, so Caius Ballerina saying, who is the blue-eyed king? If that's a prophecy, I'm not entirely sure where that prophecy has come from. I can try and pick that one up. But this is the Night's King is the kind of the imagery we're looking at there, probably. If Northmen get their green sight from the children of the forest, do dragon dreams come from dragon blood? Can dragons see the future? Yes, so that's the implication. So dragon dreams are things that Targaryens get, Valyrians get. Some of them do anyway. And does this come from their dragon blood? Well, yes. George R. Martin has been very clear. Dragons are not just big and impressive animals. These are magical creatures. And so if the Valyrians had a bit of dragon DNA within them, which is the working theory we have on this channel based on some work from excellent people elsewhere, that it makes sense that that is where their magic comes from. Andrew Kay saying, is next week still the Aragorn stream? And when do you think we will do your Game of Thrones reaction live stream? Okay, yes, so I will advertise the next couple of weeks now. So next week is going to be a Lord of the Rings stream. I'm going to be looking at Aragorn. I will have a special guest on for that. I will announce in due course. In terms of the week after that, probably, yes, I will do my Game of Thrones overall, you say reaction live stream. This is from my reread. I've been re-listening my way through Game of Thrones. I'm about 3 chapters from the end. So once I've done that, once I've got all of my thoughts up onto Twitter, then I will do a reactions and thoughts about book 1 live stream, and just open to any questions on that. So yeah, probably that will be the week after that. Caius Ballerina, do you think Jaime holding Cersei's neck as the castle fell is the show's version of fulfilling the Valonqar prophecy? Yeah, I always find it quite hard to try and figure out what the showrunners were doing, but I think if they're trying to get the as George R. Martin put it, the big beats of the story right. And what happens with Jaime and Cersei is one of the big beats. So where they ended up both dying at the same time is probably right. Him holding her neck as the castle fell, is that their version of fulfilling the Valonqar prophecy? They didn't really have the Valonqar prophecy in the show. So maybe that was the same way that they gave us a few nods to other things that we as book nerds will be aware of, like the sword Dawn that they didn't do anything with, but they showed us a shot of it to sort of let us know that they knew that it was important, but they weren't going to do anything with it. So is that I think it's their version of it, their version of the ending for Jaime and Cersei. It won't be like that in the books, I'm pretty sure of that, but the big beat of it will be the same, by which they're both, I'm pretty sure, going to die at the same time. And I think it will be my favorite still for Valonqari is Jaime. So yeah, maybe that is. Maybe I'm not giving them the credit they deserve. Reflective rambling. Picking up for Richard McCarthy, thank you. Is there significance between Rhaegar applying an old prophecy to himself versus Dany hearing one created for her? Is there a significance between Rhaegar applying an old prophecy to himself and Dany hearing one created for her? I don't know when you're saying Dany hearing one created for her. I think the echo here is there are the Prince that was promised and Azor Ahai Reborn seem to be the same thing. Certainly when Maester Aemon and Melisandre, who definitely have both been reading about all of this stuff for a very long time, they seem to use them interchangeably. The Prince that was promised seems to be more of the Westerosi version. The Azor Ahai Reborn tends to be more of the Essosi version, but they seem to be the same thing. Rhaegar was the inheritor of this prophecy that the prince that was promised was going to come from the line that he was in. So he decided for himself that that prophecy fitted him. Dany is in the situation where she will soon be faced by Moqorro, the Red Priest, who is going to say, "You are Azor Ahai Reborn." So there's a very different, and this is not a thing that she's ever thought of. And she will probably be in the same kind of situation as Stannis. How much does she buy into this? Clearly, this will be very useful for her to have the Priest of R'hllor on her side. But does she want that? It's another question indeed. So Rhaegar and Dany do echo each other, but Rhaegar was keen to embrace a thing which he himself discovered, and Dany, we've yet to see her reaction when she is told that she is the fulfillment of something. I think I had another question in the chat. Carlos Bellarmine. Oh, yes. So the Dany sees a blue-eyed king with no shadow in the House of the Undying. Okay, so this is Stannis. Sorry, my misinterpretation there. This is Stannis. Almost certainly he has got blue eyes. The fact that he has no shadow is twofold. Firstly, because Melisandre took his shadow to kill Renly with. And secondly, because this is one of these things that we can group under, and I can't remember the exact phrase, but Dany is going to be the exposer of lies. And Stannis claiming to be Azor Ahai Reborn is a lie. He's not. So I don't think there's anyone who would say, apart from Melisandre, that he fulfills the prophecies. She has effectively engineered them around him rather than anything else. So that is a lie. And so Dany will somehow expose that. This is the interesting thing, is that is Stannis really going to die all the way up north without any link across to Dany? Sorry, is Stannis going to die without any link to Dany? If Dany is going to be exposing this lie, surely they will have to meet at some point in the books. I don't know. Just a thought for you. Songbird saying, "You're amazing." Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. And let's go to this is my last question from my patrons. I will come back to the chat in just one moment. Catherine Forsyth saying, I wondered about Maester Aemon's belief that Rhaegar was the prince that was promised in the prophecy. Does this mean that he also thought that the new long night would soon be upon Westeros? Am I correct to assume that the prophecy of the prince that was promised was linked to the coming of the others and the long night? Does this mean that perhaps Aemon also thought that he had another purpose for being at the wall, namely to keep a lookout for signs of the long night coming again? Okay, fascinating questions. So we don't know enough about Maester Aemon to know his motivation for going to the wall, but I mean, the reason he had for going to the wall was a perfectly good one. The reason he had was that people were trying to collar him to make him the king. He didn't wish to be the king. Egg was going to be the king, and as long as he was around, then people would always be saying, well, maybe we could, or comparing the two of them, or maybe we could actually still try and persuade Aemon to be king rather than Aegon. Then if he went up to the wall, that's him out of the way. So, and he cared about Egg, and he didn't wish to be a problem for him politically. So that reason makes sense. The question is whether or not he had another reason for going up. He went up at the same time as Bloodraven, incidentally, who almost, although he had a good reason for going up to the wall as well, he was sent up there. He probably also, you could argue, he thought that he had things that he had to do while he was up there. And the two of them were there for, I can't remember how long, it was 13 years is the number that comes to mind. It might be something different to that. But for a long time, the two of them were at the wall together. And you can absolutely be sure that they will have been talking through all of these things. Aemon will have been reading all of these books. We know that he was interested in these prophecies. And obviously, Bloodraven was also fascinated about all these areas of prophecy and the like, and all the rest of it. So they clearly got on and understood stuff together. And it was Aemon, it would appear, who was the person who was trying to work out who is this prince that was promised, because the Woods Witch was almost certainly sent down by Bloodraven to prophesy about the prince that was promised, and to say this is the line through which it's going to be. And Aemon will have been aware of this prophecy. So that's the background. The question is the prophecy of the prince that was promised linked to the coming of the others? We simply haven't got the prophecy in front of us, so we do not know. But by implication, yes. Does this mean that Maester Aemon thinks that the new long night will be upon them shortly? Again, he's never actually that forthright about this, but the implication clearly is yes. He certainly is there thinking of who is the prince that was promised. Is it going to be Rhaegar? Then he thinks, oh, it's Dany. This clearly means that he's thinking that the long night is on its way, and he does not appear surprised. I'm looking forward to seeing any more reactions from him. But when we get the Whites appear at Castle Black, we don't get registers of what on earth is going on. My mind is blown here. It's almost as if he's expecting it. So yes, I think that he knew a lot more than we probably gave him credit for. Okay, so those are my questions from my patrons, but I will now try and pick up a few extra questions in the chat. Kaziglu Bay, I won't read out your comment, but love and hugs from me as well. But I don't know exactly what's going on there, but I hope everything is okay. Callie Summer saying, hey mods, is it okay to repost my question if it didn't get noticed? I don't know the etiquette when I only have the one question. Just for anyone who's sort of new to these live streams, I try and answer as many things in the chat as possible. I obviously can't guarantee the chat moves through very quickly sometimes. Super chats, I will always notice. Other things I can't guarantee it. By all means, post things more than once and hopefully get picked up. Let's have a quick flick through. Stevie Diamond saying if Stannis dies, then it would be just be that the Baratheons are not fit to rule. Maybe harsh, but fair. C. McBroom saying the hardest part about figuring out Nisa is that I don't know if we could say that she loves Jorah most in the world. Yeah, I don't think it's. I think the idea of Jorah being the Nisa figure doesn't really work for me, I have to say. Caius Ballerina saying, spooky. Hey, Robert, Victarion seems to say things that might foreshadow his death. Do you think he's wrong to trust Mokoro? I think Victarion is doomed, but how do you think he'll die? Yeah, he's doomed. I think that's pretty clear in my book. So Mokoro is... and what was George R. R. Martin's phrase? Thick as a stump, I think, was what he referred to him as. Great character to write, I'm sure. But Mokoro is there being very open that his aim is to capture dragons and take them away from Dany. Mokoro has been sent on a very clear mission to support Dany to be Azor Ahai reborn. Mokoro's not going to let him take the dragons. Of course he's not going to let him take the dragons. Is anyone else going to let him take the dragons? No. If he does take a dragon, it's not going to be because of his cleverness. This will be because of something Euron has cunningly managed to do behind the scenes without anyone being aware. And who's going to get the blame for that? Victarion. So maybe he will survive long enough for Dany to come back and mete out her own justice to him. But no, he's definitely not long for this world. Okay. I think with that, I am going to draw this one to a close. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning on in this one. Next week, we've got a Lord of the Rings live stream. We've got Aragorn coming up. If you're into Lord of the Rings, I've got another Lord of the Rings video coming out tomorrow. That's probably going to be about the elf economy. So you've ever wondered how the elf economy worked, then tune in or check out the video dropping tomorrow. If you are watching this back a little bit later and you would like to watch some more live streams, there will be a link appearing somewhere around here. If you would like to support this channel, the very best way to do that is by clicking on the link, which will be appearing somewhere around here to Patreon. Okay, thanks everyone. Thank you so much, moderators in particular, for doing a fantastic job today, as you always do. Take care, everyone, and I will see you again next time.